That's what this book is about, creating a perpetual tailwind to everything you do in the financial world. There are many financial gurus out there who are praising the matter of getting out of debt, but they never address this fact. This is the unique message of the infinite banking concept. Somehow or another, it never dawns on most financial gurus that you can control the financial environment in which you operate. Perhaps it is caused by lack of imagination, but whatever the cause, learning to control it is the most profitable thing you can do over a lifetime.
All right. Can you not just see Nelson in the airplane with his imagination going, thinking this through?
I pictured him as Snoopy, actually, in my head while I was reading that.
I love it.
With the goggles, with the Red Baron scarf, with the leather cap. Yeah, %.
Welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we rethink money, ditch the system, and rediscover what it means to truly thrive well. I'm Tricia Miller, mom of 7, financial coach, and founder of ThriveWell. Around here, we believe wealth is more than numbers. It's about freedom, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts. If you're ready to challenge the norm and take back control of your financial life, you're in the right place.
Welcome back to the Bankless by Design podcast. This is part 2 of the problem. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, you may want to go back and catch that in episode 29 first. In part 1, we looked at the way we've been taught to think. We have been taught to focus on chasing a high rate of return with a small portion of our income, while simultaneously ignoring the steady and much larger volume of interest leaving our lives year after year. Well, today we're going to continue that conversation by looking at Nelson's airplane analogy, and we're going to unpack why trying to go 5 miles per hour faster isn't really the answer when you're flying into a 345 mile an hour headwind. As always, thank you so much for listening. Let's dive back in. All right, let's go on and see what he has to say about housing, because it's similar.
Yeah. If not worse.
Yes.
Now let's move to the housing situation. This young man can qualify for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage in the amount of about $93,000 at a fixed interest rate of 7% APR with payments of $618.75 and closing costs of some $2,500. The problem
Let me
is
have that house deal, please.
yeah, get a house under 6 figs. Whew. It actually might be decent. Wow.
Right? Move his family into it.
The problem is that within 5 years, he will move to another city, across town, or refinance the mortgage. Something happens to a mortgage within 5 years, including the closing costs and interest paid out during these 60 months. He has paid $39,625, but only $5,458 has gone to reduce the loan. This means that $34,167 has gone to interest and closing costs. Divide the amount paid out into the interest and closing costs, and you find that 86% of every dollar paid out goes to the cost of financing. If he sells the house in less than 5 years, it is worse. This proportion never gets any better because he takes on a new mortgage and starts all over again. He thinks that he is buying a house, but all he is really doing is making the wheels of the banking business and the real estate business in that order turn.
Yes, I love it. I mean, it's ugly, but Nelson nails this right on the head. They're making the wheels of the banking business and the real estate business turn. And I love that he puts in that order because banking is first.
Mm-hmm.
So 86 cents of every dollar in the first 5 years of a mortgage. Is it any wonder that the phone is ringing off the hook and the bank is calling you and saying, "Hey, Jonathan, you're such a good customer. We would like to do you a favor and we would like to refinance your mortgage. We can shave $200 a month off of that payment. Wouldn't that feel good?" And of course, who's going to say no? $200, $300 more dollars in my pocket every month? Yeah, I'll take that. But what do we just do? We reset that amortization schedule, and that assumes we actually live there that long. I mean, the reality is most people are not. Now, I've lived in my house now, I'm going on 14 years. First time ever because of having been a Navy spouse and moving all around the country all the time. But let me tell you, I experienced those phone calls come about year 10.
mortgage company calling me. Don't you want to refinance? I'm like, heck no, I'm good. Thank you. So, if we're not moving, we're refinancing. And it's just like renting. We're just paying for the privilege of staying there, but we're never getting anywhere is the
And
point.
honestly, it's even worse if you're doing the 5-year, hopping around, because that time that you're living there, you're responsible for all the expenses as a homeowner. You're not even like getting the benefits of being a renter where a landlord's responsible for the worst stuff,
Yes. And there is I actually was just listening to a real estate podcast a couple of days ago, and they were talking about this. A lot of investors are actually renting and then buying other houses to invest in. And partly that depends on your city, depends on how long you're going to be there. So there's a lot of factors in that. But unless you're going to stay in a location for at least 5 years, it almost doesn't make sense to buy.
Yeah, 100%. That's what this made very apparent to me reading just that section. I was like, okay, if that holds true today, very clearly, I will not, obviously a flipper house or something like that. Like you said, investment changes. But when it comes to settling down, I'm going to be much more intentional in purchasing a home.
Yeah. If the market, like recently, the market went through the roof, right? So you might have been.
My brother did well.
Yes, yeah. He did well after just 2 years, but that's because the market was crazy. That's not normal. That's not your typical. So, there can be occasional exceptions to this, of course, but all right. Go ahead and give me the next paragraph or two there.
In the next segment of his spending pattern, the living expenses, you will find that the interest on his boat payments, credit card interest, plus the cost of casualty insurance on the automobiles, etc., will rival in volume the interest he is paying on the 2 automobiles. Later on in this book, you will learn how to self-insure for comprehensive and collision insurance on automobiles. Now, add up all the interest he is paying out, and you find that 34.5 cents of every disposable dollar paid out is interest. For the average all-American male, this proportion never changes. Let's assume that he is trying to save 10% of his disposable income, which is twice the average saving rates in America. That means that we have a 3.45 to 1 ratio of interest paid out as compared to savings. If you will get this young man together with his peers at a coffee break or some such gathering and have one of them suggest that they discuss financial matters, I can predict what they will talk about, getting a high rate of return on the portion that they are saving. Meanwhile, every participant in the conversation is doing the above. What a tragedy, but that is how they have learned to conduct their financial affairs.
Okay. I love this section. First of all, at the very beginning of this, you said in the next segment of his spending pattern, Nelson is always looking at the spending pattern. This harkens back to his crisis moment when he realized he needed to change his spending pattern. That was a key thing for him. The traditional spending pattern is what this young man is doing, right? He's making an income. He's paying his house, his mortgage. He's paying his car loan. Maybe he's paying student loans. I noticed that student loans weren't even in this section of the book, which also tells me something about it being dated, because everyone is racked up with student loan debt now. Credit cards, all of the things. Then you spend the rest of your cash on everything else, your groceries or whatever, although even those go on credit cards now. But you get the idea. This is our spending pattern. That's our habit. And the last 5, maybe if we're doing really well, better than the average bear, we're saving 10%. That's the spending pattern. Nelson came to the conclusion that he had to change that pattern, that it had to be a complete 180 out workover, right? He's now going to put his money into premium, and then he's going to go up and do some of his expenses. But I digress here a little bit. I just wanted to mention that spending pattern stuck out to me. All right. But he's saying even after all of these other things are added in, all of the living expenses. So you had the car at 20% or 21%. You had the housing being at 86% in the first 5 years, and pretty perpetual given our tendency to move regularly or refinance. The average of all of the interest being paid out. And if you go back and look at the picture on page 17, it's demonstrated with the bar chart. I started to mention that and kind of forgot about it, I guess. but you'll see that the dark bar that's standing tall above the autos section is the payment. And then the lighter bars, the light gray, is the amount of that payment that is interest. So what he's saying is if you took and stacked the light gray bars on top of each other, you added them all up, that would be an average of 34.1% of every dollar, or essentially 34 cents on the dollar. And that this all-American proportion never really changes. And certainly the amount of housing and the amount of transportation we see with even today's labor statistics tells us that that is still true today. So we're losing effectively 34 plus cents out of every single dollar. But because we have this mindset, I'm going to take my 5% in savings, which isn't really savings, and I'm going to go invest it. And then I'm going to be excited about my 8% return that I'm getting, which everybody's convinced they're getting at least 8% if they're in the S&P index funds or whatever it is. You know, if you put the money in there long enough and hang on for the bumpy ride, 8 to 10%. Of course, nobody's figuring in the fees, the taxes on it, the penalties if you need to touch it. Regardless, even if you've got 10% year over year over year, that little amount is earning that 10%, let's just say, while you're losing 34.5 cents on every single dollar that goes through your hands on 100% of your money. This conversation becomes ridiculous.
So and that's after taxes. So you've already lost a good portion of your money, and now you're losing a good portion to a hidden tax.
Yes.
Essentially.
So do you have these kind of conversations around the water cooler?
No.
No, you probably don't. You're not even in an office, are you?
I work remote, yeah. So it doesn't quite fit, but no.
But do you not hear people talking about the rate of return that they're making in their index funds, regardless? I mean, you're probably hearing about it online. We see it in social media, right? Or whatever it might be. I sometimes get these money groups on social media and they'll be like, oh, you should have your money in this stock. This is the one, you know, and you just watch and it's just this mentality. All these people like, no, that's the one. No, that's the one. I got better over here. And when the reality is that they're making, even if they're really successful, if they're making that percentage successfully on such a small portion of their income, while at the same time, they're bleeding out 34.5 cents of every single dollar going through their hands perpetually through their lifetime. Don't you think we might be better off to plug the holes in our leaky bucket?
And that's a perfect segue, I think, into our next section. And what I just thought about is this isn't to say that, hey, if you're doing these other things, like they're so awful, so bad. It's just we're focused on making a little do a lot rather than minimizing a lot, doing a lot of damage to us. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Imagine if you could do both. If you reduce the damage that you're taking from the interest leaving your life while also doing all these wonderful things that you're doing with your other disposable income. Imagine the tailwind that you could get to do both and get your money actually working for you and not working against you. I think that's the key right there. This doesn't rule you out if you're doing the norm thing. That's not the point here. The point is that the norm isn't going to make up for what we're losing. And we got to be able to decrease that, what's actually getting taken away from us here.
Yes, that's where the ridiculousness of this conversation around the water cooler really lies, is just the fact that they're not even paying attention to the loss that's happening because nobody's taught them to think this way. So when he says, what a tragedy, but that is how they have learned to conduct their financial affairs. All I can do is think back to the scripture of the multitude of the invalids desperate to get into the water. And they're all having that conversation. They're hoping, they're praying, they're pushing, this narrative. And it's kind of for naught when this is what's happening in the background. Okay.
All of this reminds me of a phenomenon in the airplane world. I have been flying as a pilot since 1947, and I learned early on that you could not fly an airplane through a vacuum. It must go through an environment. We have all seen the weather maps with the highs and the lows. In the northern hemisphere, the highs turn clockwise. A large one can cover 75% or more of the US. So picture this situation. You are in Birmingham, Alabama, with an airplane that can fly 100 miles per hour, and your destination is Chicago. The only problem is that you have a headwind of 345 miles per hour. Regardless of what your airspeed indicator says, your airplane is moving towards Miami at 245 miles per hour. If you want to go to Chicago, that's a very good time to get your airplane on the ground quickly. Have some patience, and the air mass will move on. They always do. And when the high gets directly over the top of you, there is no headwind. You are now covering the ground at 100 miles an hour. And now the arrival syndrome comes into play. You conclude that you just can't do any better than this. This is the ultimate situation. Nonsense. Have more patience, and the air mass will continue to move on. Now you have a tailwind of 345 miles per hour. Plus your airplane is moving at a ground speed of 100 miles per hour. Your ground speed is now 445 miles per hour. That is impressive, isn't it? But you see, it is much more impressive than most people think. Everything you do in the financial world is compared with what everyone else is doing. 95% of the American public is doing the equivalent of flying with a 345 mile per hour headwind. If you have a 345 mile per hour tailwind, the difference between you and them is twice the wind. That is a difference of 690 miles per hour. Most people in this situation concentrate all their attention on trying to make that airplane go 105 miles per hour. They would do well to spend their energy instead on controlling the environment in which they fly. You can't do that in the airplane world, but you can in the financial world. You can do it by controlling the banking equation as it relates to you. That's what this book is about, creating a perpetual tailwind to everything you do in the financial world. There are many financial gurus out there who are praising the matter of getting out of debt, but they never address this fact. This is the unique message of the infinite banking concept. Somehow or another, it never dawns on most financial gurus that you can control the financial environment in which you operate. Perhaps it is caused by lack of imagination, but whatever the cause, learning to control it is the most profitable thing you can do over a lifetime.
All right. Can you not just see Nelson in the airplane with his imagination going, thinking this through?
I pictured him as Snoopy, actually, in my head while I was reading that.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it.
With the goggles, with the Red Baron scarf, with the leather cap. Yeah, %.
So he comes up with this 345 mile an hour headwind because that's the 34.5 cents of every dollar is what he's kind of getting at there. And he's now changing it to this whole imaginary, well, not so imaginary, but analogy of the airplane because he's a pilot and he's thinking about this and he's realizing, hey, these financial headwinds are facing us all. Right? We've already kind of laughed at the cost of a car, the cost of housing, the fact that student loans aren't even in this text, right? We have a lot of financial headwinds coming at us, inflation, taxes, interest. All of these things are just forces that are robbing us of our wealth, that are just making this struggle so hard. And yet he's saying, if we change the environment, we don't think about the environment in which we're operating. So if we're working in an environment that is heavily taxed and every place we put our money is taxed, then that is going to be a more challenging environment. I mean, we're living in a high inflation rate right now. Our environment is heavily inflationary. That is painful to our financial picture. Now, this section, he's just talking about interest. It's just an environment of interest that we had never really considered before. We just think it's, again, part and parcel. And in one sense, it is. There is always a cost to your capital. The real difference here isn't whether or not there's going to be interest. It's going to be, where is that interest flowing? Is that interest flowing away from you? Or is there an environment in which you can bring it back to you? You can recapture that interest. You can stop up those leaky holes in your bucket and keep that wealth in the family or in your personal economy. So he gives us the picture. We've talked about the headwind.
then we can get to the place where there is no headwind. So our airplane's ground speed is 100 miles an hour. So obviously he's saying if we have a headwind of 345, we're going backwards. We're going to Miami at 245 miles an hour. Now the high sits over the top of the airplane and we can actually go that ground speed. And we're excited about that. Oh my goodness, we're actually going 100 miles an hour forward. And when you get to the end of that, he says, most people in this situation concentrate all their attention to trying to make the airplane go 105 miles an hour. He's saying that's what we're trying to do when we are saving our 5 or 10% and trying to concentrate on that rate of return that we're getting. We're trying to move it 5 miles an hour faster than before. And it's a struggle to do that. But if we get ourselves in an environment with a tailwind pushing us plus our 100 mile an hour ground speed, now we're really getting somewhere. And then it's interesting that he then compares it. If finances is all relative to your neighbor, then you're actually 690 mile an hour in difference. Or maybe it's not even necessary to compare it to your neighbor, but to compare to where you were.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I love this sentence here where he says they would do well to spend their energy instead on controlling the environment in which they fly. How do you do this? By controlling the banking equation as it relates to you in your own personal economy. This is the unique message of the infinite banking concept. And he mentions that none of the financial gurus are talking about this. You're busy following the typical mindset, get out of debt, work harder, tighten my belt, make more money, invest for a little rate of return, all of those things.
Get back to zero.
Get back to zero. Yes, absolutely. Instead of learning to control the environment. So the question is, who's controlling the banking function in your life? Who is that interest flowing to? Or we could even ask it in the way, where is it going? What direction is it taking? Is it going towards you or away from you? And what do you want to do about that? Because now you know. Now, hopefully, you can see it. And if you can see it, then you can take some action to do something about it. Because when you control the banking function in your life, you're actually creating a perpetual tailwind. And like Jonathan, like you said earlier, it's not that you need to stop doing all of these things that you're doing. You actually are now going to create a perpetual tailwind to everything else that you're already doing. So if you're investing in the stock market, you know how to do that and you're good at it, the infinite banking concept is only going to make it better. If you're investing in real estate, it's only going to make it better. If you're investing in Bitcoin, gold, silver,
Lego,
it's only going to make it better because you're going to have access, liquidity, and control. And you're going to be able to recapture that interest and it's going to come back to you. It's not going to leave your system forever. You just didn't know you needed to control your financing needs, that you needed to be the one in charge of that. This is definitely a paradigm shift. So I guess the question is, are you willing to take the responsibility? Do you really want to get well?
I think, this analogy kind of lays out the groundwork pretty well of, raise your awareness or become aware of the fact that you are flying 245 miles an hour away from the destination that you actually want to get to, right? That's becoming aware of our situation. Then he gets you to, my ground speed's 100 miles an hour. So I've eliminated what's going against me. So I think that's beginning your infinite banking concept journey, recapturing some of that interest that's leaving you, right? And so once you get to a place where you have erased that from your life, okay, now I'm flying with 100 miles an hour ground speed. I'm getting somewhere. And then, he talks about getting to the 345 mile an hour tailwind, right? Where, okay, now I've built my system. I'm fully utilizing it. Now I'm flying. Now we're cooking with some gas, and then, you have the comparison, like you said, of maybe not to everybody else, but to where you were. And then you can look at yourself and be like, I am in a 690 mile an hour difference of where I was. And I just think he kind of just lays out this little journey in a really simple way. And he says it there, be patient. Like this isn't overnight.
No.
You're going to do some work. You're going to lay some groundwork. You're going to build a system. Rome wasn't built in a day, use the cheesy line, but he says, be patient. Wait until that high system is above you, right? So that's building the system, getting there, and then allow it to take you where you need it to go, right? So I think it's, he does a good job of being almost like a preacher where he lays out a nice analogy, and it does a really, really good job. The 345 mile an hour tailwind, right? That's what I was just saying, of doing the infinite banking concepts and doing the other things that you're already doing, and creating that nice marriage where you're controlling your banking system for whatever you're doing, that you're already doing. And so, yeah, I just think it's such a good wrap up there. And I think something that more people need to be aware of that he also brings some attention to in this section is, like you said, the cost of capital, right? Like, we often just don't really consider it as the opportunity cost of utilizing cash, or the cost of capital when we utilize a credit card to pay for a transaction. Like, the paying interest on that transaction is the cost of your capital, right? And is there a way to reduce that, or to be the one distributing the capital? Yeah. Yes. Receiving it, right? Yeah. So again, just a change of that environment. Don't let me be the guy paying it out. Let me be the guy receiving it. And you can do that. You don't have to be a banker. Like, you can become your own banker, right? You don't have to work at Wells Fargo to do that. Yeah. I think he wraps this section up so well with that analogy, and I really like it. So that's all I have to say.
Well, that was fantastic. I'm so glad you brought out the point about being patient and waiting. That is a key point, because this doesn't happen overnight. And that can be a deterrent for people. People are willing to put their money in a 401k and not touch it for 40 years. But when they come to the infinite banking concept and they even have a little bit of loss of liquidity in year one, they're like, what? I can't touch that. I can't touch only part of it for a little while. Like, really? You can't touch any of that. 40 years without penalties and taxes. There's so much mindset issue here. There really is. But it is important to recognize this is a long-term play. This is not an overnight solution. And I do love the fact that in this chapter, he's just laying out the problem of interest. In fact, I think we missed that one sentence. There is a sentence on the upper right-hand column on page 17 where he states the problem is that all these items are financed by other banking organizations. Like, right there, he answers it. That's the problem. The banking function is being done by somebody else. You have abdicated that role, and you abdicated it because you didn't know that you could actually have that role and you could do something differently. But now you do know. And so what are you going to do with it? Harken back to John chapter 5, verse 6. Do you want to get well? How are you going to respond to this now that you see this? And if you don't see it, I want to give a challenge. This would be the challenge. Get out your bank statements. Pull out your mortgage statement, your credit cards, your car payments, any loans or lines of credit that you have, and take just the interest portion from this month. Just do 1 month's worth. Total up the amount of that interest. Now take that and divide it by your net take-home income and see what that percentage is for you, and see how many dollars of your take-home pay are going just to interest. Now, the challenge here, that will give you the interest going to other organizations. But don't forget that everything you buy is financed, even if you pay cash. So what is the opportunity cost is more of an invisible cost, right? We don't actually see it, but we can add up that interest. But another thing to consider is maybe you've got 5 or 10% that you're putting into investing for retirement. Let's say that correctly. What about the other 90%? Where's that going? What is the opportunity cost of a lifetime on those dollars that are just getting spent? We don't know what we could have earned on that money, but even if you took it and did a small percentage, 3 to 4% compounded over a lifetime, you might be surprised how much is lost to opportunity cost. The challenge is on the interest right now, but I just didn't want you to forget that every dollar is financed. for everything that you buy. Finally, I just wanted to remind you that Nelson says that learning to control the banking function is the most profitable thing that you can do over a lifetime. Banking is the most profitable business in the world. Start becoming your own banker and you too will be profitable. You've seen the problem. Now we need to implement the solution. And of course, next week, we are going to be looking at the section, creating a bank like the ones you already know about. So now we're going to look at what it looks like to start implementing that solution. All right. Any final thoughts from you, Jonathan?
No, I think we wrapped that up quite well. Thanks for your time today, Mom.
Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan. I appreciate you. As always, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you will like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone you love that could use this information as well. Until next time, I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we're done with the system and we're doing money differently. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs it, and visit us at banklessbydesign.com to learn how you can start living bankless by design.